From LA to Piscataway, you've come to the right place to talk all things Big Ten. Welcome to Big Ten Ted Live.
We are mere days away from the final. Can you believe it's here already? From the final college football game of the 2023 and now 2024 season. It is the College Football Playoff National Championship game in Houston, Texas. Undefeated Michigan, undefeated Washington. Both of these teams will be Big Ten members when we get this thing going for real in 2024. Welcome in to Big Ten 10 Live here, January 5th, 2024. Here's what we got coming up on the show here tonight. Earlier in the day, I was able to join Spencer Wagon at Spencer on Sports at 1600 ESPN, as I've been doing all throughout this season. Radio station over there in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We broke this one down earlier in the day. Going to play back that conversation for everybody here tonight, so keep an eye out for that. That's coming up here in just a little bit, and then coming up at 7:30 or so Central Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be welcoming in Jordan Eggleston from the Eyes on Big podcast. He's going to be joining us here tonight. He's dialed in on all things Michigan, so that's going to be fun as well. So we're going to get the Michigan perspective coming for about 30 or 40 minutes, starting at 7:30 Eastern Time. And then when we hit the top of the hour, when we get to 8 o'clock here Central Time, 9 o'clock on the East Coast, we're going to be talking to our guy, Roman Tomashoff, from Inside the Huskies at Sports Illustrated and Locked On Huskies. He is in Houston, Texas. We've got a boots-on-the-ground perspective here tonight with all things Washington Huskies. So we've got it from both perspectives. That's where I want to come in, and that's the perspective I really want to come from here tonight as we're just days away. I left my thoughts, I left my prediction and all that stuff and the matchups on the channel earlier in the week. Go check it out if you haven't already. But this is a team-by-team look. If this happens, then this for Michigan. If this happens, then that for the University of Washington as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun really breaking this one down from both perspectives. It is going to be a fantastic college football game. This is exactly the way you want to end a college football season, folks. So thanks for coming along for the ride. And thanks to everybody for coming along for the ride here this season. We are closing in. We are just 21 away, last time I checked, from 4,000 subscribers here on this channel. So if you haven't already, subscribe so you know when live streams are happening. So when you know when videos are dropping. So we know when the community posts, the pick'ems are dropping. So we know when everything is. We cover all Big Ten all year long. Monday is the championship. Monday is the final college football game of this season. But this stuff goes into the off season, right? We're going to be covering everything throughout this season. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is an off season unlike any other that we've seen here in Big Ten Nation. So we're going to be covering this thing as well as we can and as well as we usually do here on this channel as well. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to get into my segment that I was on earlier today on 1600 ESPN Radio over there in Iowa with Spencer Wagon, Spencer on Sports, breaking down this matchup between the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies.
It's kind of a Big Ten-ish championship game as Michigan, currently a Big Ten member, takes on the future member in the Washington Huskies. And our good buddy Big Ten Ted is joining us on the phone lines here on 1600 ESPN to talk a little bit about the CFP championship here on Monday. Ted, been a while. How you doing?
I'm doing great. We are in on some big action. I know we're a year away from this officially being big on big action, but a lot of Husky fans are coming into the channel. A lot of Husky fans are excited about the move to the Big Ten, and a lot of Husky fans are excited about this final game that we're about to play.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're going to see this game again, right, as part of the regular season in October between Michigan and Washington. So an early preview and maybe a revenge game down the road, too, for whoever loses.
Yeah, that's a really fun way to kind of look at this thing. There's going to be a lot of turnover, I think, next season for both the Huskies and the Wolverines. But I think it's a way of looking towards the future in more ways than one. You're looking at the future, I think. You've got traditional Big Ten, right, with Michigan and their physicality and their bully ball. And then you see that West Coast style, more open offenses and passing and all of that stuff. That's the big talking point that I've been having with a lot of fans is the contrast of styles going forward in the Big Ten with the Oregons, with the USCs, with the Washingtons. Then you have the Michigans, the Iowas, the Wisconsins, the Nebraskas, teams like that. This is going to be the first real test and proof of what we're going to see is which style wins out, at least now and in the future.
Before we get into Monday's matchup, Ted, I want to rewind to the Rose Bowl game on this past Monday, Michigan outlasting Alabama in overtime. I know Bama was the trendy pick. I picked Bama to knock off Michigan, just considering the Nick Saban factor. But I was really impressed with how Michigan came out of that one. Say what you will about Michigan and how their season has gone and the off-the-field stuff that's impacted a lot of our opinions on the Wolverines. You got to give them a ton of credit for finding a way to win that game. What impressed you the most about Michigan's win over Alabama in the semifinals, Ted?
Boy, it was that pass rush. That pass rush early on in this game. They were coming after Alabama and their offensive line from all different kinds of angles. 5 sacks in the first half for the Michigan Wolverines came from 5 different players in Alabama. Now, you got to give the Crimson Tide credit. They made some adjustments in the second half, and they looked to be, when they took the lead, a little bit of a doubt kind of creeped in my mind as it pertained to Michigan. But Michigan did really good on the defensive side of the ball. And then J.J. McCarthy, like you look back, you kind of watching this game in the Rose Bowl, and you don't think in your head, oh my gosh, he's having a really good game. You go back and take a look at the stat line, and you're like, oh, yeah, he did play a pretty good game in the Rose Bowl. And, of course, what he and this Michigan team was able to do, their backs against the wall down in that game, drive down the field, tie that game up. And when that game got tied, they had all the momentum. I thought the momentum really started to shift after that Jalen Milroe fumble. I know Michigan did not get any points to miss field goal on that drive, but it seemed like right after that, the Michigan train just kept on rolling. When this one got into overtime, I felt pretty strongly that Michigan was going to be able to finish, and they leaned on their defense once again to get it done.
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy nearly had disaster again on the opening play of the game, almost threw a pick. We saw that last year against TCU. He had the 2 pick sixes, which were really kind of the difference in that game. But I saw someone point this out on social media after the game. You see J.J. McCarthy specifically standing there watching TCU celebrate and kind of taking it in and really remembering how that felt. And oftentimes it doesn't always go that way, where you get another opportunity to redeem yourself. And in Michigan's case, they get a third chance really in the CFP to right some wrongs and erase the kind of bad memories of the past. This was a big moment for them. And again, your perspective of Michigan aside, they played like a number 1 team should, didn't they? They found a way to win that game. They didn't fold when they got down 20-13 and Alabama had the football driving to maybe make it a 2-score game. They pulled through, and you got to give them a ton of credit for that.
This is a motivated football team. Okay, when this sign stealing thing really started, I look back, and one of the first things I said, I can't exactly remember if it was the very first thing, but one of the first thing I said is this is going to be a more motivated football team, right? And that's where kind of the Michigan versus everybody mindset, and you can, like you said before, you can think what you want about that mindset and about all of this and how Michigan has kind of responded to it. But within that locker room, it's us against the world, right? I know that's a common phrase. And then, of course, you look at the T-shirts and everything. But they're playing like that. They are a very motivated football team, and they didn't need this distraction, right? Because as you just mentioned, that game against TCU, they were motivated to get it done before the season, in July, in August. At that time, when they're getting ready for the season, and then you add on the first 3-game suspension and then the second 3-game suspension. I think it just added fuel to the fire and added more motivation into this Michigan Wolverines football team, and you're really seeing it kind of come through. It was a national championship or bust situation, and here we find ourselves once again. After all of this, man, it seems like it's been such a long season, especially when we talk about Michigan. Everything that has gone on surrounding this program, 1 game to go, and this is why everybody came back. This is why everybody really, when they kid, maybe some of those juniors and players could have went to the NFL. Jim Harbaugh, right? This is why he came back. That's why everybody's back in Ann Arbor, is to win a national championship, and they got one last opportunity to do it.
Let's transition into the new guard coming in. You talked about them and kind of the newcomers coming in here in the new season that starts up later on in 2024, Ted. But Washington coming in, probably the last time we'll see Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and those guys playing for the Huskies, as they're all NFL bound after this. So a different look, Washington likely coming into the Big Ten in the fall, but this is an impressive Washington team. I know you've watched them throughout the season. I've watched them whenever I can because they're just fun to watch. And they nearly gave that game away against Texas, but again, they found a way to win that one. They found a way to hang on. And this is, as you mentioned at the start of the conversation, Ted, it's a contrast in styles. You got Michigan with their defense going up against a Washington team with an athletic quarterback and some great wide receivers. Talk about kind of that contrast in styles, if you will, and how you see this one playing out as Michigan's defense goes up against a pretty potent Washington offense.
Well, it was 4 years before I was born, but you rewind back to 1987, WrestleMania 3, the legendary Gorilla Monsoon saying the irresistible force meets the immovable object when Andre the Giant met Hulk Hogan at the Silverdome. And that's the way I look at this thing when Washington has the football. You've got the number one offense in the country for the Huskies and the number one offensive line, the number one group of wide receivers, and arguably the best quarterback in all of college football. A lot of number ones on that side. The irresistible force, right? And then you look at the immovable object, especially those big boys up front on that Michigan defensive line, this number one Michigan defense. Boy, this is going to be an outstanding battle. And for as much as we talk about Penix, for as much as we talk about Odunze and McMillan and Polk for the Huskies, it's that offensive line for me that I think is maybe the biggest cog in the machine. And I know that seems crazy to say because of those guys that I just mentioned and how talented they are, but this is a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line as the top offensive line in college football, the fourth least amount of sacks allowed in the country. They allowed a goose egg, right, against the great front for Texas, you know, those two defensive tackles in front in Sweat and Murphy. Like, that's, I think, because when you give Michael Penix, when he has time, he is going to pick you apart down the field. And that's when you kind of get into this matchup. You look at what Michigan was able to do against Alabama. They're not going to confuse Washington. Okay, this is a veteran Washington team. This is a veteran Washington offensive line. They're not going to get confused by twists and stunts and delayed blitzes and things like that. But Jesse Minter has to find a way, right? He's got to be creative in his scheme and what he's dialing up on the defensive side of the football. So that's because even though Michael Penix Jr. is really good at shifting the pocket and moving around, stepping up, awareness, all that stuff, you need to get him under pressure because I think that'd be kind of a new situation for him. He's been pretty protected all season long that he's been back there in that pocket. You're going to ask a lot out of your defensive backs, the Will Johnsons, the Josh Wallaces, the Mikey Sainristills of the world, because in order for that pass rush to get there against a really good offensive line, these guys got to cover for 1 second, 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds to allow that pass rush. Sometimes if they dial up that delayed pressure to really get in there. But then you look at it from the flip side. Okay, Washington, this is probably the best cover defense, right? I mentioned those defensive backs just now. This is probably the best covers that they faced all season long. So Washington has not seen a defense like Michigan. Michigan has not seen an offense like Washington, and that's what makes this so darn intriguing.
I'm sure several of our listeners will appreciate the pro wrestling reference as well. Ted, Big Ten Ted, joining me here on 1600 ESPN. You can follow him on X, formerly Twitter, at Big Ten Ted. Also look for him on YouTube. All right, Ted, I'm going to have you fill in the blank for each team. Michigan will win if fill in the blank. Washington will win if fill in the blank. Go.
Michigan, if they dominate the offensive line of scrimmage, because this is a Washington defense that's okay. I think they're a little bit underrated up front, but their pass defense is ranked in the triple digits right now. If Michigan can just bully ball, time of possession, keep the football away from Michael Penix Jr., that Michigan offense may be their best defense. If they can keep Michael Penix Jr. on the sideline, they win if they control the football, they control the time of possession, just play old school Big Ten football. Washington wins if they can keep this pass rush at bay, and Michael Penix Jr. is just dealing like he normally deals throughout this game, and they score a lot. Because if this thing gets into a shootout, okay, this thing gets into the mid-30s, gets closer to the 40s, I know Washington's defense isn't great, but I'm not sure if Washington can win it, or I should say Michigan. I'm not sure if Michigan can win in a shootout. I think the score is something that's very important. Okay, Michigan, I would not call them an explosive offense. Not saying they can't be explosive, but they really haven't shown that a lot this season. But when I look at the Washington Huskies, if they can move the ball, if their offensive line protects, Michael Penix picks them apart, and these receivers get open, and they put points on the board, this one becomes a shootout, scores a lot of points. I see that this one going the way of the Huskies.
All right, I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question. Is this Jim Harbaugh's last game at Michigan, in your opinion? Is he bolting for the NFL, win or lose, in your mind, Ted?
Boy, I thought at the beginning of the season in August this was his last season, and then you pile on 2 NCAA investigations, I say absolutely, right? You look at some of the openings out there, the Raiders are out there, the Chargers, right? They got a quarterback with Justin Herbert. Like, there's some decent openings, right, that could be out there in the NFL. I just don't see, when you're as coveted as you are, right, these last 2 seasons with the Vikings and then with the Denver Broncos, when you're coveted and you're a coach that's been to a Super Bowl before and you've come so close only for your brother to take that out of your hands in that Super Bowl in New Orleans all those years ago, you got to know the motivation right there, and time is ticking a little bit on the career of Jim Harbaugh. I think this is it. I think this is it. And what a way it would be for him to go out. And I think that kind of factors into this as well, right? If he can win the national championship at Michigan, right, that's the stamp, I think, on his legacy. We'll see what happens with the NCAA investigation, because then that could kind of change things legacy-wise as well. But, yeah, I believe this is it for Jim Harbaugh, right? I think he's accomplished so much in his college career, right? What he did at Stanford, what was amazing, of course, before that at San Diego, and then, of course, his alma mater at Michigan. I think it would just be, if he wins, this would be kind of a perfect cap to his college career.
All right, Ted, give me your pick for Monday. Who wins and why? If you're willing to. I don't know if this messes up your Big Ten Ted YouTube schedule, but who do you got for Monday's game?
I haven't put a prediction out publicly yet. I've been pondering this, and I am up in the air. I won't give you a score now, because that's how much of a coin flip it is right now. I think I'm leaning Washington. I think I'm leaning towards the Huskies in this one. I just think that offensive line is too good. They're not going to get discombobulated like Alabama did. I just don't know if Washington really gets going in this game, I just don't know if Michigan can score at the rate that the Huskies can. Right? But I get it on the other side of the coin, right? I could very well see Michigan just pounding the rock and pounding the rock and pounding the rock. It's so, man, I think the spread was at 4.5. I think it should be closer, but I just don't know if Michigan can score with Washington, but I could easily see this thing coming the other way. Stay tuned, folks, to Twitter and YouTube. That'll be my official prediction, maybe minutes before kickoff or something.
All right, Ted, before I let you go, just a thought on bowl season for the Big Ten. What did you think? What were some of the highlights, some of the lowlights? I'm sure Iowa football makes your lowlights category after getting blanked by Tennessee, but what did you think overall the conference's performance in bowl season this year?
Well, these last two games, right, if you count the 2024 alignment, of course, Washington's win over Texas and Michigan, that's going to be the big highlight, because as we kind of go further down with this whole bowl season, I still think there's still meaning in a lot of these bowl games, but with opt-outs and transfers, some people, and I understand that point of view where they say maybe they don't mean as much anymore, but I was looking a lot at these Big Ten SEC matchups, and the Wisconsin one, I think, is one that really slipped away. That was a great opportunity. I understand maybe why the Badgers were able to do as well offensively, because that was not a good LSU defense. I think that was one that really got away. But the record against the SEC, right, was not very good. I expected Penn State to maybe do a little bit better against Ole Miss, but they kind of had some opt-outs and stuff kind of towards the end there. But look, Iowa, they need to score points. Like, we need to come out in 2024, and we need to put some points on the board. So we'll see who their offensive coordinator is going to be in Hawkeye country. But I thought the depth was on display, right? If you go back earlier into the bowl season, I thought Rutgers played really well in their win against Miami. Minnesota kind of took care of business. How about Northwestern, right? I kind of went on a limb picking Northwestern in that one, but how about the Wildcats finishing off with an 8-win season as well? So that was a big one. I think you saw the depth on display maybe towards the lower end of bowl season when the Big Ten really started off really well. And then once again, if you count 2024 alignment, UCLA beating Boise State in the LA Bowl, USC, right? Miller Moth throwing 6 touchdowns against Louisville out there in the Holiday Bowl, Oregon taking care of business in the Fiesta Bowl. So they went 9-4 in terms of their 2024 alignment. So the future is very bright for this league, but to maybe shift the narrative, right? That's kind of been the Big Ten can't get it done in the postseason. To shift the narrative, you're going to have to compile more than one of just these postseasons where you beat some of these SEC teams and you get to a championship type of level. So I thought it was good, not great. Thought it could have been better, but in the end, we'll take it. That was my segment from earlier in the day, live on 1600 ESPN. In the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area as our super preview of this college football national championship game continues. Monday night, Houston, Texas, the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies. Coming up in about 10 or so minutes, we are going to be joined by Jordan Eggleston of the Eyes on Big podcast. He's on the Michigan side of things, so we're going to be talking to him about the Wolverines in our first segment. And then coming up at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, we're going to be bringing on Roman Tomashoff from Inside the Huskies, Locked On Huskies, Sports Illustrated, all of his affiliations over there. Let's check in with some of our viewers here tonight. Paul Wall is in the house here tonight. One of our resident Michigan fans, Gerald McKinley, is also in the house tonight. Dubs up. You can probably guess where he's coming in from the Washington perspective. Dubs up also saying UW is going to be excited to play downhill and load up with big boys against Michigan. It's more of their defensive strengths than defending the pass. It's that front seven that I think Washington is going to focus on in trying to be good in this one. Hey, what happens? And we're going to touch on this. I have this in my show notes. What happens if Washington loads the box? Can J.J. McCarthy beat you over the top? Because this is a Washington passing defense that is in the triple digits. So that is certainly something to keep an eye on. I want to talk about this something as well. Rick Olson, he's one of our Duck fans, one of our Oregon fans. And this has been brought up, I know, on Twitter or in other places a few times. Rival fan bases. If you're an Ohio State fan, or if you're an Oregon fan, you should not root for your rival. Okay, Ohio State, you shouldn't root for Michigan just because they're in the Big Ten right now. And I think that this one, like if it were Michigan versus Texas, right, that would provide an even bigger argument, or a little bit of a different argument, I should say. But considering that they're both in the Big Ten, and if you're rooting for conference pride, then if you're an Ohio State fan, for example, it's very easy to root for Washington. If you're an Oregon fan, like Rick is here, you're kind of coming at this from the other side of things. Okay? You're coming at this because I understand. Look, I get it. If people, because of the sign stealing situation, if they don't want to root for Michigan, I get it. I understand it. That's fine. But yeah, if you're an Oregon fan, right, of course you're not going to root for your arch rival, the Washington Huskies. But yeah, sometimes it's okay not to root for anybody. Right, that's okay too. It's okay just to sit back and watch football. Like, I'm a big fan of just sitting back and watching football. That's a great thing about college football. Every single Saturday you turn on the TV, good things happen. Exciting games happen. So maybe this is just one of those opportunities to just sit back and maybe enjoy it as well. JPH chiming in here tonight. Hawkeye should go get grub. Well, you might have to wait at least another year. I feel if Kirk Ferentz was going to retire, maybe we'd hear it by now. But yeah, I would. But it doesn't look like Ryan Grubb is going to go anywhere. So if Kirk Ferentz maybe retires at the end of next season, then maybe you could have, because Ryan Grubb, of course, has that connection to the state of Iowa as well. Dubs up. Wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it be wild if Harbaugh comes out throwing it? putting it in the air on the first drive. And that could be something to get him a little bit off balance and get Washington. Sometimes when you get into these games, when you think you know it all, and I think I know it all, sometimes they come out doing a little bit something different. Now, they don't, of course, you just have 7 days to prepare for this game. All right, so maybe it's a tad different. Maybe it's a little bit different in terms of the preparation. But, yeah, what happens? Okay, when they see on the other side of this thing, when they see maybe the weakness over there, the triple-digit passing defense over on the other side of the coin. Texas ran the ball as well. They ran the football pretty well as well against the Washington Huskies. So you got to take that into consideration. There's a lot that could possibly happen here. There's a lot to keep in mind, but Dubs Up brings up an interesting point. Could this be something Sharon Moore really dials up? I don't think so. I think Washington's underrated in the defensive line, which I think could be another reason why maybe Washington maybe comes out throwing. But you saw what happened when Michigan came out throwing to the Rose Bowl. J.J. McCarthy nearly turned it over. Now, obviously, you got to have faith and you got to have trust in your quarterback. That's obviously going to happen. But I think Michigan wants to come out. I think Michigan wants to establish something at the line of scrimmage and then throw off of it, try to get a one-on-one matchup deep. Our guy, Husker Mike, it's been a minute. Husker Mike, Happy New Year, happy 2024 to you. He is in the house here tonight. Boy, it was not that long ago when the Nebraska Cornhuskers were the talk of the town, right? When everybody was talking about Dylan Raiola and everybody over there. No one could stop talking about the Nebraska Cornhuskers around early signing day. Obviously, it's dialed off since, cooled off since then, but we are going to be talking about Nebraska and many other teams once we get into this offseason as well. Gerald McKinley providing an opinion on this as well. I think JJ could pass easily if the Huskies want to put 7 or 8 in the box. The matchups will be there. Can Roman Wilson get open? Can Colson Loveland get open? Can Cornelius Johnson get open? Etc. You know the suspects by now here in the wide receiver room and in the receiving threats for Michigan. Will they be able to get open one-on-one matchups? I see it as maybe run. When is Sharon Moore going to dial up that play fake? When is he going to get that matchup down the field? When is he going to hit that deep ball as well? Jackson Johnson in the house here tonight saying what's up to Big Ten Nation. Also saying Michigan-Washington will be a great revenge game in the 24th season. I still can't believe that's going to be a conference game once it gets to 2024. October 5th. This is a rematch, and it's in Seattle, Washington, which is very interesting, right? We talk about TV a lot. I work in the TV business, so I'm pretty interested, right, in that side of things. Okay, it's already been established. No West Coast big noon kickoff. So that Michigan-Washington game is either probably going to be on NBC in primetime in Seattle, in the greatest setting in college football, right, as they call it, or it might be a mid-afternoon on CBS. So these are the type of matchups when you bring in USC, when you bring in Oregon, when you bring in Washington, when you bring in schools like that, okay, these are the types of matchups that a Michigan versus a Washington, that is CBS and an NBC, are paying for. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very fun, I think, as well. Spencer chiming in a battle of contrasting styles. I just don't see this being a tight game. That's interesting. We might get back to that here at some point during the program. Either Michigan wins by 10-14. Remember, the spread is at 4.5. Or Washington wins similar to the TCU game from last year with Michigan chasing the whole game. That's an interesting perspective. We might come back to that one. Here just a little bit later. So that's going to be really fun because I really want to get to that because the contrasting styles, I said it in my preview. Who's going to dictate the flow of the game? Is this going to be a track meet? Is this one going to be up and down? Or is this one going to be a Big Ten slugfest? So you might have something there. Spencer. All right, let's move on with the show. It is time to talk Michigan Wolverines. It is time to belt out probably the best fight song there is out there in all of college football. And with that, I am very pleased to be welcomed now Jordan Eggleston of the Eyes on Big podcast. And Jordan, we've been We've been big Kurtless this year on the Eyes on Big podcast. I just want to say, before we get into the conversation, great job. Tremendous job in that chemistry with Jeff this whole season. It's been fun. Whether you guys have been talking about football, whether you guys have been talking about stealing Christmas ornaments and decorations on lawns, it's been fantastic listening to you guys. So it's been great. I just wanted to say that right off the bat. How did that kind of thing kind of come about, and what's kind of been your experience talking and kind of getting back in the podcast game and interacting with Big Ten fans this season?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I'm excited. This should be fun. The Eyes on Big thing kind of came out of nowhere. So I've been a listener to it, obviously a big-time Big Ten fan. So I've listened to Jeff and Kurt for a while. And he reached out to me, I want to say maybe around July-ish, as he knew that Kurt was potentially going to have to step away for this season, and asked if I'd be interested. And I was. I mean, I had a small regional podcast here in Michigan with a buddy of mine, and we just kind of quit doing it. It fell off, one of those things. So I kind of missed it. And if you give me a chance to talk ball, I'm gonna be here to talk ball anytime I can. So I love it. So.
And that's what exactly we're going to do right now. All right, Jordan, let's jump into this matchup. I was watching the Rich Eisen show earlier this week, saw a clip of it online. He was talking a couple of Michigan guys together, right? Rich Eisen talking to Charles Woodson. And Charles Woodson goes out and said, hey, if Michigan wins, completes this undefeated season, 15-0, this is the greatest Michigan team of all time. In terms of recent history, the competition is 1997. Of course, Charles Woodson was on that team. They shared a national championship with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Where do you view, if this team gets the job done against the University of Washington, are they the greatest team in Michigan history?
Yeah, so anybody that's listened to the Eyes on Big podcast, I've posed this question to Jeff a couple different times throughout the year. And, I mean, I'm not one of the quote-unquote old heads, but I do consider myself a traditionalist in the sense of what college football is. In my lifetime, it's easily the best football team that Michigan's ever had. You're going to have some of the old generations that are going to go back to the black and white days of college football. I just don't think that those are comparable to what we see in college football. It has to be. If they complete a 15-0 season in today's landscape of what college football is and all of the different idiosyncrasies that we have with college football, I think you have to. And when you have Charles Woodson himself coming out and saying that it is the greatest team of all time when the other team in the conversation is his own, generally those players defend their own team and say, no, we would have beat these guys. He's owning up to it and saying it, so I think that lends just enough credence to it. So, yeah.
Let's stay on the legacy front, and let's talk about the head coach of the Wolverines. Let's talk about Jim Harbaugh, his legacy. Because for the last few years, right, you can win a couple of Big Ten titles, you can be in the race, you can get to a New Year's Six game, you come up short. Last 2 years, of course, in the college football playoff. Now he got over the hump in the semifinal. If he wins a national championship, what's kind of his legacy at the University of Michigan when all is said and done? Because if he comes back, signs a new deal, right, there could be more to be built on this legacy. But if this is his last game and he does come out on top, where does his legacy stand at Michigan?
I think if he gets this win, you have to mention him in those conversations with Schembechler, with Carr, with Yost, with those guys, those names that are in Michigan lore. You have to. I mean, winning a national title in college football is not easy. Like, it's crazy. People act like, a national title, it's one national title. I don't think they realize how truly difficult it is to accomplish this. So if he does pull this off, I think you have to have him in that conversation with the greatest of all time at Michigan. Now, you can argue till you're blue in the face as Michigan fans of who the greatest is, but his name is going to be in that first sentence when you start to have that conversation.
Let's talk about him for a minute. We'll finish off, then we'll get more into this ball game as well. Are you preparing for this to be his final game? I thought coming into the season that pre-Cheeseburger Gate, pre-sign stealing stuff, that this was a last dance type of thing with everybody coming back. Harbaugh, of course, flirted with the NFL the last 2 seasons. Are you preparing for this to be his final game? But kind of in the Michigan camp, where are you with the whole Harbaugh situation?
Yeah, so me personally, I actually said before the season I thought this was going to be it. It's just all the writing was on the wall. This team was old. All these guys came back. It was always the mission statement was it's this one last chance. We're all in for a national title, and it just felt like everybody pushed all their chips in, and I think that included Jim. As the season's gone on with all of the different controversies and scandals and whatever you want to call them, I think it's pushed him more and more away from the college game. I think he's tired of the NCAA, and I don't know that I blame him. The NCAA is a joke of an association, whether it's against my team or any other team for that matter. If they win, it's going to be hard for me to believe that he comes back, because then he's accomplished everything that he's ever wanted to do in the college game. And then in the game of football itself, he's only missing one thing, and he's always talked about that itch to chase that Super Bowl. So he wins Monday. I have a hard time believing he's back, especially if the Chargers do offer.
Right, yeah. So I kind of said this earlier in the program here tonight, whereas, like, look at his college resume. Like, look at what he did at Stanford, of all places, in the academic difficulties that there are there, and built that into a program. Like, if you look at David Shaw and what he was able to do, that's a lot of what Jim Harbaugh has built. And when you look at the late 2000s, 2010s Stanford, like, that was one of the Pac-12's best Pac-10 / Pac-12 programs at that particular moment in time. That is look at what Stanford has maybe been as of late, right? That might kind of sum up. And then what he's done at his alma mater, right? Bringing a national title to Michigan, that might really seal the deal. Let's get into this matchup a little bit. This Michigan team seems to have an advantage on offense at the line of scrimmage, right? This is a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. A couple of years back, of course, it's Washington. We'll get into that here in just a minute. But it seems like they can just run downhill and establish that traditional Big Ten mindset. Even though this seems to be an underrated Washington front, how do you view this thing? Do you think Michigan can run the football just right at Washington and maybe keep the ball out of the hands of Michael Penix Jr.?
I think anybody that's watched Michigan over the last 3 years knows they're going to run the ball, whether by hook or by crook. They'll run it to a flaw at times. So I think the biggest thing with it is the trenches are going to decide this game, I think, on both sides of the ball. But for Michigan offensively, it needs to be a lot of the similar game plan that they had against Alabama, where they get a lot of that pre-snap motion and that creativity and the quote-unquote eye candy to try to get Washington's linebackers to flow into the wrong gaps and wrong places. This Washington defense isn't lauded as the most elite and athletic, and there's not first-round picks all over it like you hear about with Alabama. But there's good players. I know they have one really good linebacker. I'm blanking on his name, and I'm going to get ripped for that, and I'll take it. That's fine. He's extremely good, and you've got to get him out of gaps. I mean, so I want to see a lot of that pre-snap motion to try to confuse that, and then that's where you see that offensive line, because they're so well coached and so disciplined. Then they can use their duo schemes and a lot of their power schemes, and they can move the defensive line that way. Because then it's easier to get to that second level of the linebackers.
It seems to me that, and it's still crazy to me, I know Michael Penix Jr. has been at Washington for 2 years, but every time, just being in Midwestern Big Ten country, every time I still think of 2020. I still think of Indiana Michael Penix Jr. Even he's been in purple and gold.
It's hard not to, because of it's Indiana. It's not a traditional power in any realm of football, and then we're being Big Ten fans. Anytime you put Indiana in the national spotlight like he did, you have to think about it.
Oh, boy. Okay, so for me, it's the time of possession, right? It's keeping the ball out of the hands of Michael Penix Jr. How important, because obviously Michigan is going to do what they do. Like, look at the game against Penn State where they just didn't throw the ball, right, late in that game. But is there kind of a hidden benefit in their ability to run the football and keeping the ball out of the hands of Michael Penix Jr.? Because if you give him a lot of possessions in this game, they're going to come up with points.
I mean, the best way to combat an elite offense is to keep it on the sideline, right? Yep. So I think that has to be the ultimate goal. Because I mean, let's face it, they've got 3 wide receivers over there that are top 2-round picks, 3rd round at the absolute worst. Those guys are going to get their catches, so you want to limit the opportunities as much as you can. So, yeah, if Michigan is going to have success running the ball, they're not going to stop. You could see in a Penn State game plan where if they start seeing success running it, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a jumbo package for a little while, especially in the second half of this game. And they're going to be completely fine just boa constrictor in this game apart if they get that opportunity.
We had a commenter early in this game, and I've heard it in other places too. I had a commenter early in the show, I should say, kind of talk about, okay, Michigan, we know what they like to do. We know they like to pound the football. Washington, bring up 7, bring up 8, whatever, however many guys that they want to bring into the box. What are the chances, you think, that this game almost flips on its head, and we talked about early in the show as well, Washington is in the triple digits in the secondary. What do you think? What are the chances you think this game flips? and all of a sudden JJ's got to throw the ball. Can he throw the football with some of those weapons against this Washington secondary? Do you think that could be a path to victory as well if this thing kind of flips and Washington plays some pretty good run defense?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a situation where they load the box up and they force you to be more of a true drop back passer, JJ's shown that that's where he struggles. And if that does become the situation, then the pressure gets pushed to Sharon more to get creative and be smart with JJ in the fact that he is athletic and he's best out of the pocket. So I don't want to see him in a situation where he's just standing back there trying to cut apart a defense, because he is a good quarterback. He can read a defense, but his percentages drop drastically when he's a stand in the pocket and throw it kind of guy. So while if Washington does that, the counter to that is you be athletic and you get on the edges and you force them to make a decision. Okay, are you going to come up and take his legs away, or are you going to let him beat you down the field with Colston Loveland, A.J. Barner, Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, those kind of guys?
Let's dive into this one. Let's go to the other side of the ball. Rick Olson, one of our commenters and fans, he says, pressure Penix and Michigan wins. That's kind of where I really want to dive into right now. Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, right? Michigan won it the last 2 years. Washington won it this year, and they won it for different reasons, right? Michigan the past 2 years, road graders, just push, blocking downhill. This one's all about pass protection, right? They allowed the fourth least amount of sacks so far here this season, and I think we lost Jordan here for just a little bit, so we'll try to get him back momentarily. But we'll get while we're waiting on that. We're going to get to some comments here, and we got Mike chiming in, Husker Mike chiming in. Oh, he thinks it's going to be a good game. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a good game. Let's get back to that comment that I kind of had before, but in the meantime, Husker Mike dropping the super chat, dropping the $10. We very much appreciate that, Mike, for the support here on this channel as well. Let's get back to this comment. In a battle of contrasting styles, I just don't see this becoming a tight game. Either Michigan wins by 10-14 or Michigan wins similar to the TCU game. And the contrast of styles is certainly going to be interesting in this game. And boy, if Michigan can kind of wind down that clock, it puts a lot more pressure, of course, on the Michigan Wolverines. We've got Jordan back here now. We've got Jordan. We got to love our technology here.
Hey, I don't know what happened there.
We are back in action. That's okay. We roll with the punches here on the program. So what I was getting at, Washington and their offensive line, great at pass protection. You saw what Michigan was able to do, mixing things up, confusing Alabama's offensive line. My initial take on this is, boy, I don't know if Michigan is going to confuse this Washington offensive line. They're pretty darn good at protecting their diamond back there and Michael Penix Jr. What does Jesse Minter have to do to try to mix things up? What can he do to try to get Michael Penix Jr. uncomfortable? Because if you can't get Michael Penix Jr. uncomfortable, it could be a long day.
Oh, yeah, he showed that in the Texas game. I mean, he had zero pressure, zero hits on him, and he's too good to give that kind of time. He'll sit back there and cut you apart. So, yeah, I don't think you're going to confuse him either. Penix has seen pretty much everything, and he's been around the block a lot. And this offensive line, that's the thing that I think is the best about this Washington offensive line is they're such a good unit. They're a good 5 to 6 guys that play well together. There's no like top 5 pick on this line. It's all 5 of them together are a great piece. So I think it doesn't come down to trying to trick them. It doesn't come down to games. I think it comes down to being fundamentally sound in what you do. You've got to win at the line with your 4. I mean, Michigan's defensive line has been their backbone of this defense all year. So guys like Kenneth Grant, guys like Chris Jenkins, guys like Mason Graham, they've got to win on the interior so that your edges can try to just get that pressure late. And it's not even so much with Penix. I don't think you have to sack him. I don't think you necessarily even need to take him down a ton. You need to get there and get him off his spot. Just make him move, and all you need to do is just get another second, get another beat, just to slow him down a little bit and get the timing off of these receivers that some of those guys can get home. Because there's going to be blitzes. Jesse Minter is an aggressive defensive coordinator. You'll see a lot of corner blitzes. You'll see a lot of nickel blitzes, and Mike Barrett coming late, delayed blitzes from that middle linebacker spot. So you just got to get him off that spot and out of timing just a little bit, just that split second, so that defense has that time to get home, because you're not going to confuse him. You're not going to trick this guy. He's seen it all.
Let's talk about the defensive backs here for just a minute, because I believe that pass rush and these DBs, it's a relationship, right? As we say, so because it's going to be more difficult. We know that, we just said that it's going to be more difficult to get pressure on this O-line. Michael Penix Jr. very aware. He's, like you said, he's seen a lot of stuff at this time. Well, how do you see this matchup? Because boy, is this a great matchup between Will Johnson and Mikey Sanderstill and some of these Josh Walls and some of these other DBs against these Washington wide receivers. How important and how well do you think Michigan can cover to maybe allow that pressure more time to be able to get there?
Yeah, sure. So Michigan runs a lot of zone. You don't see them in a lot of straight up man-to-man situations. And I think in a situation like this, that's extremely smart because you're not going to cover these guys for very long. I honestly think, and I would be completely shocked if you don't see the exact replica of the 2021-2022 defense versus Ohio State. The exact defensive game plan they ran against them, where you got two safeties back, nobody's over our head, we're going to rally the ball. You can have your 6 yards here and there. You can have your 10-yard gains here and there. But when we get into that red area, you're going to have to do something else because you don't have those plays where you can take the top off. You're going to have to win in that 20, inside the 20s. And I think I like our chances in there. I think that's the gamble you'll see, and I think that's the risk that they're willing to take.
Boy, the red zone, that's interesting. I brought that up in my preview earlier in the week. This is let's see if I can remember these numbers. Michigan's second in the country, I believe, in red zone defense. They've, that's 16 out of 23 scores, right? Teams have been in the red zone 23, scored on 16 of them. And I think it was only 3 passing touchdowns, if I remember correctly.
I think that's right.
Yeah, so then we're going to be talking about this with Roman when we talk about Washington, is the health of Dylan Johnson, right? When they get down in that red area, because you look back at that Washington, or the Texas game, I should say, and kicking field goals, a lot of field goals late, right? They were able to move the ball, but the drives kind of stalled out, and maybe not every single one of those drives got into the red zone, right? But when they get into field goal range, close to the red zone, that's maybe when the field shrinks and you don't have that much over the top. That's maybe an advantage for the Michigan Wolverines. Would you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, and another piece of the Dylan Johnson potential injury is his pass pro. He's a guy he's going to stand in there, and any kind of blitzers, he's the guy that deciphers that. He's the guy that takes that on. And they just haven't played a whole lot of other running backs and put them in those situations. So if his health is massive to this game plan, because you'll hear more from your Washington guy here after this, but I know they like to get the running game going with him and keep the balance of this offense. And I'm going to be watching it very closely to see how his health looks and how he looks in that first few drives, because I think that does dictate the red zone, especially in this game.
What do you got for X factors? I'm very curious to see what you think. I think you brought up, I listened to, I can't remember if it was the preview. It might have been the reaction that you and Jeff did for the Rose Bowl. You mentioned Ernest Hausman, right? I think coming in from an injury. I think it was Junior Colson as well that you mentioned possibly as an X factor maybe going forward. But who are coming? You can start on offense and then maybe go to defense. Who are some of your X factors for Michigan that people should have an eye on going into this game?
Yeah, offensively, I think it's not the usual suspects. I mean, everybody expects Blake Corum to have a good game. Everybody talks about J.J. McCarthy and, can Roman Wilson take the top off with a play-action pass. I'm actually more interested in A.J. Barner in this game, the Michigan's second tight end, because everybody focuses on Colston Loveland. Mm-hmm. And Michigan traditionally runs a lot of 12 personnel. They went away from that against Alabama because scheme-wise it worked. I think in this Washington game, you'll see more 12 personnel, and then Washington tries to take Colston Loveland away, knowing the threat that he is. That leaves the opportunities for A.J. Barner. So offensively, I'm looking for him, especially.
We lost Jordan again. We'll get him back here. In just a minute. We've got some technology stuff here going down. But in the meantime, we'll get to some more comments as well here tonight. And let's see. When we talk about Dubs up, Dylan Johnson's health is his only trepidation for this game. Yeah, that's an interesting one because Dylan Johnson has played a big part, right, in some of these football games throughout the season, right, as Jordan was just saying, kind of providing some balance as well, kind of throughout this thing, because so teams can't solely focus, right, on the pass game as it exists. I think for them on the other side is now they can kind of mix in and kind of sprinkle in some stuff in the run game, I think, as well, is very interesting. That something that we got to take a look at here as we've got Jordan back in action as we finish off our stuff. We'll get this right. We got this, baby. We got this.
I don't know what in the world's going on here. I don't know what's happening. We don't ever have these kind of technical issues with us. So I don't know. It must be my video. I'm not sure.
All right.
But
go ahead. Yes. So we were talking about
defense. I mean, that's my thought offensively. I look for AJ Barner. I think he could have a big game because I do think you see more 12 personnel. Defensively, it's a little more interesting because we've seen so many players, and so many of those players have made plays throughout the year. And we talked about being able to get Penix off his spot. So to me, it has to be Mike Barrett because he's so good with his blitzing from that linebacker position. And it's not a ton of times that it happens, but it seems like when Jesse Minter dials that up, Mike Barrett finds a way to get home or at least disrupt that play. And I think you see several of those. And I think he's going to be the guy that does it, and they're going to trust him more in that blitzing game, and then they'll have Junior Colson be the guy that kind of picks up tight ends on those leaking routes. So I look at Mike Barrett, but this defense has just been a unit the whole year, and they play so well together, and it's a very symbiotic thing of them. So if I had to pick an X factor, I think that's where it's going to be. Plus, hey, my thing on the eyes on big has been this team is old. They don't get a whole lot older than Mike Barrett, the dude that's his 6th year, came in as a quarterback, kind of paid his dues. I think he has his moment in this game.
That's the thing. These are both pretty old teams and experienced teams, right? Yep. Washington is very experienced. We know all about Penix here in Big Ten country, and of course, what you're saying right there with the Michigan Wolverines. So, how do you see this one going down? We'll kind of we'll finish off with this, right? This eye view that says who can kind of impose their style more. Whose style do you think wins out? Do you think Michigan wins out? Of course. Well, I kind of have a feeling which way you're going to go, but maybe explain to us why.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: I'm going to pick Michigan to win the game. I'll get that out of the way right now for you. But it's interesting to me because these two teams offensively are very different stylistically. We know what Washington, their weapons that they have, and Michigan wants to run the ball. But they are both also slower-paced teams. They both are very comfortable with low possession games. Washington just has a tendency to hit more of those explosive plays. So Michigan has to limit that. And I just think that this defense has been so good all year at limiting that. And we know the game plan that they're going to see with this too high safety look to kind of limit those plays. So I think Michigan can dictate that pace a little bit. And actually, when I broke this down yesterday on the Eyes on Big, I actually said I thought it was going to be a higher scoring game. I liked the over on the gambling side of it. Yeah. The more I go into this and the more I watch, I'm actually starting to lean more towards an underplay in this game because I think both these teams are going to be okay slowing it down. So I do think Michigan comes out, tries to establish the run, works the running game. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we see some play action passes early. Yep. And a couple shots to try to loosen that Washington defense up. So I do see Michigan winning this game, and the numbers at 4.5. I think that's pretty close. I think that's a pretty solid number. Vegas isn't usually wrong. The number I put out last night for the Eyes on Big was 31-25 Michigan. I think this game stays pretty tight for the most of the part. I think I could see Michigan getting out to a little bit of a lead and trying to sit on it. And then Washington making that big push late with all of those weapons.
What's the season? I guess I'll kind of get you out of here on this. It's been a wild 4 months, whatever it's been, really, ever since the preseason stuff. What's it been like in Michigan country? Because there's been, even from a neutral Big Ten perspective, that I like to try to provide. And, of course, you guys provide that on your podcast as well. It's been so up and down, and there's been so many different opinions as it pertains to Michigan. But as a fan, of course, you're always going to root for your team. You're always going to support your team, even throughout everything. What's it kind of been like from a Michigan fan's perspective through all the ups and downs on the field and off the field this season?
And it's tough for me because I try to look at things more in a realistic view than a lot of the quote unquote fanatic side of what fans are. And sure. A lot of people on social media dislike Michigan fans because of what they see on social media and that vocal minority. But I do think a lot of this fan base has just gone into, you know what, we're going to enjoy this season for what it is. And then whatever comes out with all of this other stuff, we'll worry about that later. This is a ride that the majority of this fan base has never felt or never seen anything even close to this before. So I think the majority of this fan base is like, we're going to enjoy this and let the chips fall where they fall after this with the NCAA. That's my personal belief. I mean, I'm not tied into the program at all. I have some people that I talk to. So the whole scandal thing, I have my personal beliefs on it and my thoughts on it. But at this point, this team has done so much, and they've come so far with this. I just want this game to happen this season. I think these players deserve it. And I think the fans, some of us more grizzled fans, deserve it. Sure. There's some of these young pups out there that haven't quite earned the clout that they're chasing after out there.
I will say this, okay, because there's some people out there saying, using the word vacated, and it takes a lot to vacate a title. Like that's all I'm going to say. Auburn, remember the whole Scam Newton stuff? That title did not get vacated, right? And you could probably go down the list at some of these other things as well. So, will there be penalties?
Well, the other piece of vacating a national title is the College Football Playoff Committee has nothing to do with the NCAA. They're two separate entities. So the NCAA can say whatever they want about the regular season games, but they can't take a title away.
Yeah, I would be. I say this. I would be very surprised. I would be borderline shocked, I should say, if that indeed did happen. But Jordan, we appreciate you chiming in here and providing things from the Michigan perspective. I know it's maybe been tough on the podcast with Jeff to maybe contain the inner "Go Blue" just from randomly shouting "Go Blue" on the podcast. But appreciate the neutrality on all the covers this season, and I'm sure we'll see you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is Jordan Eggleston from the Eyes on Big podcast over there talking all things Michigan Wolverines over there. So bring up some good points. We kind of powered through things with the technology over there with him, but he kind of brings up some good points of everything that he kind of talks about with the Michigan Wolverines as well. We're going to continue with the show here tonight, and right now I am pleased to be welcomed with my guy right now. He is Roman Tomashoff.
Hey!
We, ladies and gentlemen, we got boots on the ground, baby. Roman is in Houston, Texas, getting ready to cover this thing over there as well. So, Roman, you were in New Orleans, and then the national championship games in Houston. Did you just take did you go back home to the Pacific Northwest? Did you just take the little bayou route over to Houston? How have you kind of dealt with this whole travel thing the past couple of days?
So I know you were giving me some guff when we were talking about this yesterday. I know you wanted to make sure you got this in there. No, so I actually got a chance to go home, see my mom and my sister in Los Angeles for a couple of days. Yep. So we drove New Orleans to Houston, flew Houston back to LA, flew LA back to Houston. I know it's a little circuitous, but it was nice to, get a couple of days with my family, get all that in there too. And then just kind of still stay somewhat down in this area. And then, flew back into Houston this afternoon and now we're here. So it's been a whirlwind of a couple of weeks now at this point. I'm exhausted, but we're here. We're ready to cover a national championship, having a fantastic time doing it all.
Are there any Washington fans down there yet? What's kind of the vibe with Husky Nation right now in Houston?
Yeah, so I've heard from a lot of my friends who are going to be down here. I'm actually getting together a little meetup at Eighth Wonder Brewing this Sunday night for any Husky fans that are down here that want to come out and just hang out. It's a fantastic place. Food trucks, brewery, distillery, got all of it, games, whatever. So there are a lot of Husky fans that I've seen, that I've heard from. I know they're not all here yet, so it sounds like it's going to be a pretty good turnout because this is a somewhat easier trip to make compared to Louisiana. I know not by much, but sure, a little bit easier for some fans.
I'm excited to see this one, and I'm very curious, right? If some Washington fans were confident, they kind of booked, hey, let's go to New Orleans on New Year's Day, and while we're at it, let's just book the hotel for the next week after. I'm very curious to see if that happened. Let's get into this game a little bit, and I kind of asked the same question with Jordan as it pertains to Michigan. I'm going to ask the same question to you with Washington. Okay, we got Don James, we got the Dog Father, we got 1991, we've got some good teams. If 15-0 happens, is this the greatest Washington team of all time?
So I'm sure some older fans will have their own view. But me personally, being born in 1997, seeing everything that I have throughout the course of my life, and just seeing how many different ways this team has found to win. Appreciate you, JPH. It's awesome. But as seeing all the different ways that this team has been able to find a way to win this year, no matter if it's 15-7 against Arizona State, whether it's 52-42 at USC, whether it's they've been underdogs now, Ted, in 4 of their last 5 games. And so far, they've found a way to win. And this is including the Michigan game. So far, they found a way to win every single one of those games, and that's so impressive. Behind Michael Penix, who had literally the greatest game I have ever seen a quarterback play. I could not believe how dialed in he was on some of those throws. The second touchdown he threw to Jalen McMillan over the middle was just, that was a fantastic throw. And he was doing that time and time and time again. Myself, I like to stay composed and in one piece when I'm in the press box. And I'm sitting there between a couple other fantastic writers, my editor, Dan Rayleigh from Inside the Huskies, Christian Campbell from On Montlake, two fantastic humans. And all of us were, wow, every single time he made a throw, because he was just that impressive. And I think that to answer the question, that yes, with everything this team has been through, from being 4-8 2 years ago to now having this, I really hate to use this term, but it's the only one that fits, this juggernaut offense that has been so incredible all season long that there's no way you can't call this the greatest team of Husky history.
So the 2019 LSU was a fantastic, maybe the best offense I've ever seen.
Yes.
Okay, 2020 Bama was still pretty good as well. I'm putting them in that. I don't know about 2019. I might put them in 2019 LSU category, because
it's getting there.
I think despite Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were great, and who knows, at the NFL level, some of these guys at Washington might step up. But I think Washington's right. I think they're in the ballpark. I think they're in the conversation as one of the best offenses recently, right, in these last 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is. And when we talk about this offense, everybody's going to talk about Michael Penix Jr. Everybody's going to be talking about this wide receiver group. This Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line might be as big a part as any, because the way I see it is, if Michael Penix doesn't have time to throw, right? Look at like, I give USC as an example. Caleb Williams, right? Fantastic quarterback, but he's always running around back there, right? That offensive line was not good. Like, if that happens at Washington, we might not have success. How important do you view this offensive line as being maybe the biggest cog in the machine for the Washington Huskies?
Oh, it's everything. If you don't have the offensive line, none of this functions. As you just said, Michael Penix doesn't have time to throw, even though he's been really impressive at getting the ball out quickly. Even without that time, that doesn't happen, right? You can't get Dylan Johnson established on the ground, which he didn't necessarily have his best game in the Sugar Bowl, but just having that threat of Dylan Johnson is huge. And just to give a shout out to the offensive line, that's a group that, despite winning the Joe Moore Award, was bagged on and was doubted coming into this game, into the Sugar Bowl, because, Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat are going to be the biggest keys, because there's no way that Washington's offensive line can stop those guys. And they did a fantastic job of doing that. I got a chance to talk to a lot of guys at Media Day. One of my favorite interviews was with right guard Julius Buelow. I asked him, I said, you guys just won the Joe Moore Award, and you're still being doubted physically. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, what do you have to say to that? And all he told me at the time was, we'll see on Monday. Didn't want to give anything away, and I respect that. And then I'm walking off the field. I'm going to do the press conference with Kalen DeVore. And all of a sudden, some giant human grabs me around the shoulders and just said, hey, what did I tell you? And it's Julius Buelow. And I love that, because it just shows that this team hears it all. This team knows what they're doing. This team knows what they're going for, and they are going to do everything it takes to protect Michael Penix and get them over the top and potentially win a national championship on Monday night.
So when you look at Michigan, they dialed up some really good pressure, confused the Alabama offensive line. I don't think there's going to be confusion, right, with this veteran, this great Washington offensive line. But what do you think Washington has? How can they neutralize? Because this Michigan pass rush, do you feel pretty confident in their ability to kind of know and kind of pick up what Michigan is throwing at them? Or is there any type of concern as it comes to Michigan possibly pressuring Michael Penix Jr.?
No, I'm definitely confident in this group, right? Michigan has a fantastic pass rush, despite what some Michigan fans have come at us on Twitter saying, love the Locked On Huskies podcast doesn't respect Michigan. Absolutely not the case. Michigan has a fantastic pass rush. I love their scheme. I love everything they do on the defensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. But Washington's offensive line has been so good this season. They did a great job neutralizing the Oregon pass rush, neutralizing the Utah pass rush, Oregon State, Texas. All these pass rushes were supposed to be phenomenal, supposed to hit home and sack Michael Penix 3, 4, 5 times. That didn't happen. And I'm not saying that Michigan isn't good enough to potentially sack Michael Penix once or twice. That's absolutely a possibility here. But Washington's offensive line has done the job all year round. And on top of that, Dylan Johnson's fantastic in pass protection. Jack Westover is a really good pass protector at tight end, as is Devin Culp, as is Quentin Moore. They have so many extra options, if need be, that Michael Penix, if you need to keep a tight end and a running back in the block, Michael Penix is still going to trust Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, Jeremy Bernard, whoever's out there at wide receiver, to go out there and win and make a play.
Dylan Johnson ain't sitting on the sidelines. He's not going to be in street clothes. But what's the health? Really, what's the percentage, should we say, about Dylan Johnson in this game? We saw the injury up against Texas. What do you think we're going to see with DJ in this one?
That's a really good question. So I know for a fact that he was playing somewhere between 70 and 75% in the Oregon game. And we saw what he was able to do in that game. He was fantastic. Rushed for 150 yards, 2 scores, threw for a touchdown, a little pop pass. So I would say that it's somewhere between 85 and 90%, just from what I've heard. Tomorrow, since we're talking about this on Friday, tomorrow on Saturday is media day. I want to get a chance to ask him about it again there. But just from the conversation we had at the last media day, he said, yeah, there's no way I was sitting any of those games out. There's no way I was going to do that because this is why I came here. Okay. And now that he has that opportunity, if he's at 50%, he's still going to find a way to go out and play and give his most for this team. Not that it would be the same, but that would still be a thing.
I thought in that Pac-12 title game, Dylan Johnson might have been as important as almost anybody. And some other guys, like USC was a game where I think he went off as well, if my memory serves me correctly. Like the balance, so they just can't kind of dial up pressuring and attacking this offensive line with 6 guys, 7 guys. It's the balance that's kind of going to be a big part to this one possibly as well. Let's talk about the other side of the football. I think Washington's front 7 is a little bit underrated, because when people look at Washington and they look at their defense, people are like, well, their secondaries, and I will admit I may be a little bit guilty of this, but Washington, their secondaries in the triple digits. But when you look at Braylon Trice, when you look at some of that front 7 up there, that's some people maybe aren't giving it their due. But Michigan, we know what they want to do. They got a great offensive line. They want to road grade. They want to push ahead. They want to run the football. How do you think Washington can come up and contain what Michigan wants to do and Blake Corum in this run game? Or how do you view kind of those front 7 guys in terms of defending this Michigan run game that we all know is maybe one of the best in the country?
Yeah, so Michigan has a fantastic run game, and that's the biggest thing that I'm curious about in this game. If you ask me what is your number one matchup that you're watching, it's Washington's front 7 against Michigan's run game. Where the one game, because we saw CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue gash Washington's run defense at times in the Sugar Bowl. They had to go away from it because they were trailing for a lot of the game. But we watched them get away from it. But when they were doing it, they were gashing them for 6, 7, 8 yards at times. So I'm really curious to see what Michigan tries to do there. And I know that Washington is able to come up with a solid plan of attack to stop the run game, because another fantastic rushing offense that they played twice this year, stopped it really well the second time, is Oregon. I know it's a little bit different when you're super familiar with a team like Oregon. You're playing them for the third time in 2 years. So there's a little bit extra going on there, but the plan is there. They've shown that they're able to do that. And my question is, all right, how are you going to execute it? Because tackling has been a big issue for this defense this year. Yeah. And making sure they can get guys on the ground is going to be one of my huge points of emphasis in this game.
So let's look at the secondary, right? I mentioned it before, and a lot of other people have talked about it. And I want to talk about this point because sometimes I think I got this game figured out. You might think you got this game figured out. And sometimes that's how these big games go. It's like, well, this team does this team does that. This is how it's going to go. But sometimes in these games, things flip and unexpected things happen. What about if Washington creeps up 7 guys, they creep up 8 guys, and all of a sudden Michigan goes over the top? How do you view about the matchups in coverage for this Washington secondary and J.J. McCarthy and possibly defending him? I listened to your podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. You guys are saying that maybe there's not a lot of concern with J.J. throwing the football. Kind of break down that matchup if that's how Washington decides to approach things on defense.
Yeah, so that would be, in my view, and I want to make sure I get more clarification on that, but in my view, I think that's what they want to do. Because when you look at this Michigan offense, you see a fantastic run game with J.J. McCarthy sprinkled in at times, right? I think that J.J. McCarthy is very talented. I think that in the right NFL system, he can end up being a very good quarterback. But I don't, especially if you're comparing the two of J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix, right? And then, like, even leaving that comparison aside, if you look at what they've done all year, their bread and butter has been running the ball and finding a way to attack you on the ground, just extend drives, and keep the ball out of Michael Penix's hands. Like that seems like what the easiest game plan would be for Michigan. So when you talk about Washington secondary, I feel that they've done a really good job in the second half of the season, making sure they can get better and making sure that they found a way to lock things down on the back end, where Jabbar Muhammad has been impressive in coverage all season long. He did a fantastic job against Xavier Worthy in the Sugar Bowl. He was unbelievable. Elijah Jackson has had his ups and downs. We've seen him do really well. We've seen him do somewhat poorly. Mish Powell in the secondary, he's in the nickel position. He's done a really good job at just filling his role, making sure that he can, take care need be whenever his number is called, whatever his role might be. So I think that Washington would just say something along the lines of, okay, we're going to dare you to throw the ball on us because we know what your strength is, and we're going to try to take away your strength. I think that would be just the best way to describe this.
Here's the way I view it. Okay, I've watched a lot of like Michigan gets put on Fox every week. It seems right. I've watched a lot of Michigan the last 2 or 3 years, and here's the way. So for Washington, they average 350 yards passing per game. I'm not sure what they average scoring wise and points per game right now, but let's say Washington, an average game, or maybe not up to snuff, is 30 points, right? Sure. Can Michigan, right? If we get into a shootout, if that's what we do, because hey, if Washington creeps ahead to the line of scrimmage, right, and maybe Michigan isn't able to run the football as well, and they have to throw it, I just think that plays right into what Washington wants to do and make this a track meet. If this goes back and forth. Right? Like if I'm Washington's defensive coordinator, bring up 7, bring up 8, go ahead, throw the ball, go ahead, get a couple of 60-yard touchdowns. We're going to come right back and get one of our own. That's just the way I view it from the Washington Huskies. What's kind of your take on that specific scenario?
You hit the nail on the head right there, because we've seen them play that style of game already this season. We saw them do it against Caleb Williams in the USC. That game ended 52-42. Where when they needed to get a couple of stops, they did. And they just said, all right, we're going to try our best to take away your strength. Caleb Williams, unbelievable player, right? He's able to get his own, do that. But Washington said, okay, we know that we can come down and score right away. We know that we're going to do that on your defense too. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination comparing the USC and the Michigan defense, especially, with me being Alex Grinch's number one public hater. But I just think that Washington, they've proven at multiple points this year that they're very comfortable playing in a shootout. That's something that they've shown. We're okay doing that. We love just throwing the ball over the yards, scoring in the 40s where we possibly can. So I really think that Washington would be more than comfortable in that scenario.
I just don't think Michigan's comfortable. I just don't think. I don't want to say they can't do it because that's very definitive. It's 0. It's 100% depending which way you're looking at it. And I don't like to put 0 or 100s on anything, right? It's college football. It's a very unpredictable sport. But if we're looking at who's comfortable in whatever situation, that's I think what this game comes down to, right? Is you play bully ball straight ahead for Michigan, and that's where they want to be comfortable as well. You look at this thing for Washington, they go up and down the field, right? That's where they want to be comfortable as well. It just seems like this game is going to go one of two ways. Which way is it? Which way exactly is it going to go? And if it's where points are being scored, okay, I don't think Washington is going to be held below. I don't think this is going to be like a typical Michigan game where I think they're going to go 20 plus at least. Right, I know that's a very low number for you guys in Seattle. Right, I got to get used to 30 points. It was really funny when I started covering of these Pac-12 games as kind of a special preview, special reaction. I put some of these picks out there. I'm like, what? 65 for an over/under? What?
Do you remember what it was for the USC Washington game?
Oh, I did pick that one. Remind me.
It was 76.5 at the start. And then the halftime over/under was 106.5. Yeah. I know it's going to be a little bit of a change from a Michigan-Iowa scenario for you, or Iowa Northwestern.
We had, was it 3? I think there were 3 record over-unders with Iowa this season. It was Iowa Northwestern, Iowa Nebraska, and there was one other one thrown in there. Illinois, I think, was the other one. So be ready for that. By the way, be ready.
I'm
for
prepared.
That. Or maybe we need to be ready for that. I don't know. Whichever way you kind of slice it throughout this game. Let's talk about X factors. Who are some of your X factors on offense and defense?
So one of my biggest X factors is on defense, and it's defensive tackle MJ Ale, another guy that I got to spend a lot of time with at media day. And I told him, because he's a converted offensive lineman. On the 4-8 team in 2021, he started at guard for this team. Now he's a starting defensive tackle. He's a really big, really athletic dude who I think could have an NFL future. And so one of the things I asked him was, you've done a really good job at learning the position, at progressing it, coming along. What's next? How are you going to take that next step and become a more productive defensive tackle? And he said, I need to find a way to get into the backfield because I know I'm going to get double teamed, and I need to do a better job of shedding that and finding a way to make a play and get into the backfield and cause more havoc. So and he did that a couple times in the Sugar Bowl, and I'm very curious to see if he can keep it up. I know Michigan is a fantastic offensive line, so if he's able to do that, I think that would say a lot to not only how far he's come, but into how UW is able to execute their game plan. I also want to highlight the other starting defensive tackle, Tulu Gasanoa, because when he's off the field, I remember one game in particular when he's against Oregon State. When he's off the field, Oregon State was averaging like 5.5 yards per carry. When he was on the field, they were averaging 3. He is just a force in the middle, one of their sixth-year seniors in there, and has done such a good job this season. So I think that on defense, that's where I would be leaning.
And what about on the offensive side of the football?
So the offensive side, I'm going to stick with one of our traditional anytime touchdown picks from Locked On Huskies. I'm going to go with Jeremy Bernard because Washington has a fantastic – I like to go, sometimes a little bit under the radar. I know Tuli and Ale being starters aren't necessarily the boldest of choices, but I like going with Jeremy Bernard because he's a guy who has filled so many different roles for this team this year. He's made a play in so many different big spots. He had a big punt return in the Pac-12 championship game. He was huge in Washington's win down in Arizona back in late September. That was the first game after Jalen McMillan went down. Or the second one, excuse me. But he had such a big role in that game where he's lining up in the backfield, taking handoffs, catching screens, catching deep balls, doing a little bit of everything. And Washington, they have the 3 receivers who that they're going to try to find a way to attack those guys as best you can. Then you throw somebody extra like Jeremy Bernard in the mix, and he can really make or break the offense at times.
Jeremy Bernard, former Michigan State Spartan, Roman's second favorite team.
You know it.
I want that on the record. I want that.
We had to get it in there somehow.
I know. It always happens. We got to get it in there somehow. I want to talk because we'll get back to the championship here in just a minute. You bring up Jeremy Bernard. Like a lot of people say, I hear people say, well, Washington's going to take a deep drop off. It's a 1 year up and however many years down type of deal. I think Jeremy Bernard, like I said that earlier this season, when I kind of watched and kind of got a lay of the land as it turns to Washington. Jeremy Bernard is what, the fourth wide receiver essentially on this team. He could be a top 2 on a lot of teams in college football. A lot of
absolutely.
teams. What impresses you the most about Jeremy Bernard?
Jeremy is just a fantastic athlete. He's really good in space. He's so strong after the catch. He knows how to pick up yards after the catch. He's got fantastic hands. He does a little bit of everything. You can see that there's still a little bit of development that needs to happen from a route running perspective, but you can see all the strides that he's made in just 1 year on campus. You can see what's going to be next for him. And just, Ted, I know, we talked a little bit around signing day. Since then, Washington's picked up a transfer commitment at wide receiver from former Cal receiver Jeremiah Hunter. Those 2 dudes, that's going to make sure that this passing game might not be the same, but it's still going to be just unbelievable next year.
And Giles Jackson has a red shirt, so he's coming back too,
yep.
right? Yeah,
that's correct.
What else? So like that could be a pretty solid 3. I'm not sure what else is beyond that for Washington and Will Rogers, right? A lot of people talking about top transfer quarterbacks. Like, look at Will Rogers in the Mike Leach system, and I know he kind of took a drop under Will Arnett. They kind of changed things up offensively. Like, he's gonna. I would be surprised if he did not light it up, right? I would be surprised if he doesn't throw for 3,500, 3,700 yards, something like that here next season. Do you have, let's get into prediction time. What are kind of your final thoughts on this national championship game for the Washington Huskies? I don't need to ask you who wins. I got a pretty good idea on where you're going on that, just like Jordan with Michigan. But tell me why the Huskies maybe come out on top.
So, and this is going to sound like a shot at Michigan, and I promise you it's not. I believe in Washington's coaching staff.
Okay.
This coaching staff is not very, experienced in terms of Power 5 level when you talk about Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, all these guys. But everything they have shown you this season has shown that no matter what has been in their way, that their players are up for the challenge of whatever is thrown in front of them. They've done a fantastic job making sure these guys are prepared for being 10-point underdogs against Oregon, for being underdogs basically on the road in New Orleans, being underdogs at Oregon State, going down to USC, and while they were favored, just knowing what kind of dogfight that was going to be. Everything that happened in the Arizona State game, having Utah, a horrendous offense, put up 27 points on them in the first half, finding a way to allow 75 total yards in the second half. All of those things just show that this is one of the 5 best coaching staffs in the country, in my opinion, at this point in time.
So, when I look towards next year, if we get if Harbaugh moves on, and I've really put some thought into this. At first it was Dan Lanning, now I've kind of maybe pivoted my tone to Kalen DeBoer. Is Kalen DeBoer? Maybe I'll ask you, because I kind of go back and forth on this right now, and obviously you know more about it than I do. Is Kalen DeBoer the best? This is crazy. This is stupid to say.
I love this question.
I know. Is Kalen DeBoer the best coach in the Big Ten next season?
Oh, it's going to depend on what happens with Jim Harbaugh. I can't say no. I can't. He's done nothing in his 2 years at Washington that will make me say no. Like he hasn't. He has basically done no wrong since he's gotten here.
Okay, let's kind of go down the list a little bit. All right. And I'm gonna go here so you can see the logos in my shot. That'll certainly help with me. Ryan Day, right? You could throw out there. He's had a lot of success. He's won 10 wins. He's won 11 games. Got to a national championship in 2020, which Kalen DeBoer has now gotten to a national championship. But there has been some pushback lately, right, on some things with Ryan Day. But I don't know if I can sit here and say Ryan Day is the best coach of the Big Ten. That just okay. So if you kind of go down, I was kind of before Washington. I did mention I think Dan Lanning is up there, right? He is right now. I view him as a tremendous recruiter. Got to get some of these wins in some of these bigger games. Well, I'm sure you don't want this to happen, but eventually you got to beat Washington, right, to get into the
we don't need to talk about that scenario. I like that he's 0-3 against Washington. I love that personally. So,
but you look at some of these other coaches. James Franklin kind of throws not winning the big one, hasn't been to a playoff, hasn't been to a championship. You kind of just look at the other logos up there. You see a lot of guys, like a Kirk Ferentz who's been around a long time. At Iowa, but just hasn't, there was 1 year back where it was at 2015, fell just short of getting a playoff in the Big Ten title game. Like, you kind of look at all the locals up there, like Lincoln Riley, right, hasn't been able to do it yet over at USC. I know it's a really small sample size, and Kalen DeBoer would have played in exactly 0 Big Ten games. Well, I suppose this could be counted as one in Michigan.
Technically 2 if you want to count Michigan State. 3 if you want to count last year, too.
That's true. But I don't know. I know it's crazy to think that, and I know it's crazy to say that, but I look around and I think the only competition right now is Ryan Day.
And it's wild to think that, being like at 2 years, his second year at Washington. And I think just to kind of reinforce that argument, Troy Dana did a fantastic interview yesterday, Washington's new athletic director, where he was asked all about Kalen DeBoer's new contract and what that will end up looking like. And he said, we're going to do a deal that like nobody's ever seen before.
Right.
And just knowing that, and knowing Troy, who has been here less than 3 months, and he understands football. He understands what he wants to do there. But just seeing how invested he is in Kalen DeBoer and just saying, all right, because at first when we kind of looked at this, it's going to be like, okay, Lincoln Riley's getting $10 million a year. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer is going to get to that level. Now Kalen DeBoer is the national championship, and it's he's going to have to get more than $10 million a year. It has to be that at this point. So just knowing somebody who's been on the job for less than 3 months is willing to make that significant of an investment in Kalen DeBoer, I feel like that should just speak for itself as part of this argument too.
Nick Saban getting paid $11.4 million. How close does it come to $11.4 million in your opinion?
That's tough because Washington's going to make a whole lot of money off this national championship run, off of moving to the Big Ten, off of all these things. I think it's going to come pretty close.
Do you think it's going to eclipse 11? Do you think it's going to be around 11?
You know what? Let's just say 11 even. Just for the time being, let's say 11 even.
So right now, I just got some salaries kind of pulled up. Ryan Day, 10-3. Lincoln Riley, you said at 10. Brian Kelly at 9-9. Jimbo Fisher, I know he's fired, but he was 9-1. Kirby Smart is at 10-7. So if he does get to 11, he'd be higher than Kirby Smart, who's won 2 national championships. Dabo Swinney is right at 10-9. So to kind of give that a little bit more perspective in what exactly that would be, because, man, if Kalen DeBoer sticks around, and I know Ryan Grubb is not going to be here forever, but man, this you got to feel great. But it's not just what he's done the last 2 years. His overall record as a coach is utter madness.
It's unbelievable.
It's utter
There's
madness.
nothing out there like it. Like even Chris Peterson, he was like 94-10 or something when he got to Washington. Something equally wild. But we saw what he did. We saw that he had to build that from the ground up and go 7-5, go 8-4, all that before he was able to get to that college football playoff level. That didn't happen with Kalen DeBoer. He just came in and said, "Yeah, I'm going to go 11-2. Oh, now I'm going to go 14-0." It's unbelievable. There's just things he's done since he's gotten here.
Kalen DeBoer at Sioux Falls, USF. They were NAIA, it looked like when they were here, but I covered the conference that Sioux Falls was in back in college in the NSIC. But in the NAIA level, Sioux Falls from 2005 to 2009, 67-3, lost just one conference game, and that was his first year. So you won't go undefeated. Went to the four seasons at Sioux Falls. You go on to Fresno State, you go 3-3. A merely 3-3 and then 9-3. A merely 12-6 in 2 seasons at Fresno State.
That really dropped the winning percentage there.
Boy, that's terrible. And then you go combined so far 25-2 at Washington, with the 2 conference losses coming last season. 104-11 overall record in his coaching career. That is just it's utter madness. I haven't seen anything like it. Right, I think Urban Meyer, right, might have started off that hot, right, when you look at Utah and then you Florida and Ohio State, but I just haven't seen anything that close. What sets Kalen DeBoer apart from why is he such a good coach in your mind?
He, as good as he is as a coach, he's an even better person. Every interaction that I've ever had with Kalen, every interaction that I've ever had with one of his players is as genuine and as real as they come. When we were at Media Day, when we were at all the events at the Sugar Bowl this past week, every single player took time to talk about his culture, to take time just to talk about all those things and how they were a little unsure about Kalen at first. And then they talked with him. They got to know him. They said, yeah, this guy is genuine. This guy is real. This is somebody that we want to play for. This is somebody that we want to be around. And just like whenever you see him in any of these interviews, that's just the kind of person that he is. He's caring, he's genuine, and he wants the best for his players on and off the field. And it just makes him a really easy guy to play for. And I know this all sounds like fluff. Like, truly, I know it does. But after having spent 2 years around this program that Kalen has infused, that's all it is. Whenever you talk to anybody on his staff, I talked to multiple staff members just trying to get the lay of the land, trying to talk to a whole bunch of things about them this past week. They just said the same thing, and it shows. It shows in their attitudes. It shows with the way these players do things. It shows with every aspect of what this program has become and why he is such an easy person to work for and such an easy person to play for, and those results show up on the field.
I said in my segment at the beginning of the show, I was leaning Washington. We'll see if that happens. I'll post maybe my prediction tomorrow. This is the furthest I've gone in a week without posting a prediction because I am. This is as lost as I've been. I mean, it's
tough.
I know what both teams want to do. Like, I understand the matchups. Which way it's actually going to go, it could go any which way. Roman, we first got together when Washington was joining the conference back in August. It seems like a lot has changed, especially up in the Pacific Northwest. We appreciate your insight throughout this season. Good luck. Stay safe. Have fun, most importantly, in Houston, Texas, covering this national championship game. And who knows, we might be bowing down when all is said and done.
Ted, appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure to come on here.
All right, thanks to Roman Tomashoff from Inside the Huskies, Locked On Huskies, and everything over there as well. Well, folks, national championship game. It's on Monday. We're going to be coming on live after that matchup on Monday night to break it all down, have your comments. It's the final college football game of the season. So, until then, enjoy the final days that we're still in this college football season. And until Monday night, I'm Big Ten Ted, and we will see you in the next one.